Hi there, and welcome back to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with me, David Charlton. And today, it is part 3 of this mini series where I talk about the coach-athlete relationship. And we look at it through a mental toughness lens. And I look at something that I see every now and again in a sporting environment. See how some coaches absolutely love goals. They're driven, they're purposeful, they're clear about what success looks like. But sometimes the athlete in front of them feels very, very different. They avoid goals. They feel uncomfortable talking about the future. They get overwhelmed and embarrassed by doing so. And then when targets are mentioned, they freeze. So today's episode is all about understanding the difference between a high goal orientation coach and a low goal orientation athlete, and how we bring those two worlds together more positively, more closer. Because when this happens, when it's all handled well, it's going to build confidence, an element of control, and a healthier mindset, as well as a stronger coach-athlete relationship. So let's start with the coach. This highly goal-orientated coach. They do love setting targets. In their mind, they're very creative. They can visualize success really, really clearly. When it comes down to being assessed or judged, they don't worry about it at all. In fact, they enjoy it. Then you've got competing and competitive environments. They thrive in this type of environment. And why? It's because they've got a strong sense of purpose. Also, when it comes down to standards, they set high standards. So the bar is really, really high, both for themselves and for their athletes and other people. When it comes down to cognition, they're thinking about winning an awful lot, as well as progression and getting better. And I think you'll agree these are powerful strengths. This type of coach is going to bring direction, structure, accountability, high expectations. And the reality is, without this mindset, environments are probably going to lack some sort of focus. So it is really, really important and a great skill to have. However, there could be some tension. Why? Well, what feels motivating, what feels energizing to this coach can sometimes feel overwhelming and really threatening for an athlete. Some athletes, they do struggle with goals. So that's right, I'm talking about the low goal orientation athlete. So you might notice this athlete feels uncomfortable. They might even feel silly when you talk about targets. When discussing the future, to them, there's lots of ifs, buts, maybes. They lack that clear sense of purpose. They avoid targets or any long-term thinking at all. And there's a fair chance that this type of athlete's going to distract themselves. They'll be gaming, sleeping, or there'll be some sort of avoidance behaviors there. This athlete can also self-sabotage to escape any pressure. And often when things go wrong, they blame others. Now, this athlete can also get labeled as lazy, but actually, laziness doesn't come into this, or being laid back. Often, actually, it's a fear of judgment. So their thinking might well be, if I don't commit to a goal, I can't fail. If I don't say it out loud, then nobody's going to judge me. And also, I think it's important to remember, in sport, many athletes are quite young. Obviously, you've got the youngster in the youth sport environment, but even those in their early 20s, their brain is still developing. So planning ahead and thinking long term aren't exactly skills that they've got at that time in their journey, but they will mature and develop those skills over time. Just like when it comes down to managing emotions. Some young athletes, these big outcome-focused goals weigh really, really heavily on them. And I guess this is where the coach-athlete relationship becomes really, really critical. So again, I'm going to draw upon research from Professor Sophia Jowett. This time I'm going to highlight 3 key ingredients of this effective relationship. So we've got the closeness, so that trust and emotional connection. We've got commitment, where both parties are working towards shared goals. And I'm going to underline, in my mind anyway, shared goals. Then we've got this mouthful of complementarity. I managed that one. So where they work well together, understanding each other's roles. And, if a coach pushes ambitious goals without understanding how the athlete feels, they're going to find commitment and any trust is going to drop. But when the coach does take some time to understand what motivates the athlete, what worries the athlete, and what actually feels achievable to them, then the goals become something that actually can be built together. And again, together is the key thing here. If the goals are imposed on the athlete, it isn't going to work. So that shared ownership is what really strengthens both the relationship, commitment, motivation, as well as performance and a sense of well-being for the athlete. So now I'm going to share some practical ways that coaches can actually support athletes. Number one, surprise, surprise, I'm going to start with self-awareness. So the coach asking very, very good questions can develop the self-awareness of the athlete, which means that they're going to make better decisions. And in this case, they're going to set better goals. They're going to be more committed. They're going to be more motivated. So, simple questions. What do you enjoy most about the sport? What areas would you like to improve? What would it look like if you were a 6 out of 10 in this area right now, but then you jump to a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10? When you play your best, what happens? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What happens out there on the pitch, court, or in the pool? And these type of questions build some sort of ownership without pressure. Now, we're going to talk about process over outcome here. Then we've got the goal setting side too. Some coaches, despite being high in goal orientation, may get this a little bit wrong. They might not be aware that there's different levels to goal setting. In this case, they can really help athletes by educating them about outcome goals. And what I mean by that is the winning, the trophies, selection, those type of goals. Then we've got performance goals where KPIs, stats, some measurable standards come into it. And then we've got process goals where we focus on behaviors that are under the athlete's control. So for example, in a match or in a training session, it might be about communication, whether that's enthusiastic communication or instructing their teammates or colleagues. It might be about resilience, so bouncing back and recovering quickly after mistakes. They're process goals. And in the research, it's massively evident that process goals can increase that level of control or that feeling of control. And as a result, that feeling of control builds confidence. Another thing, so a third thing here a coach can do is keep it simple, 1 or 2 focus areas at a time, especially for this athlete who's low in goal orientation. Any more, you're going to overwhelm them. Too many targets, too many goals, well, they create pressure. And if we're thinking about this athlete, if they are young, if that brain is developing, again, too many targets or goals, pressure and overwhelm are going to come in and kick in really badly. Number 4, we've got about reviewing and refining goals. Now, for me, this is huge. There's so many people out there who are very goal orientated, but again, they get this wrong. They don't actually spend enough time taking a step back and working out what's going well, what they can improve, what needs to change. Allowing time to do that is huge. And how the coach can help the athlete in this respect is to regularly be asking, again, some very good questions. Simple questions. What's going well for you? What's helping you? What would you adjust? What needs to change? Then, what are you enjoying? What's putting a smile on your face? And if we're thinking about that word process, if it's about this communication aspect or about the resilience piece and bouncing back from mistakes, if they rate themselves a 5 out of 10, what would make a 6 out of 10? What would make a 7 out of 10? Questions like this, they create a learning environment rather than a judgment environment, which really harms the development of mental toughness and performance. Another important thing to consider here is, and our 5th tip, if you like, for coaches, is understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic goals. So, extrinsic goals are similar to those outcome goals where there's a huge focus on winning, on selection, on praise, whereas intrinsic goals are linked to enjoyment, to learning, to personal improvement, to feeling proud of any efforts that they've put in. So yeah, they're going to be closely linked to process goals. And for longer term development, intrinsic goals are so powerful. When athletes want to improve for their own reasons, motivation is going to become much more stable and resilient over time. So everything I've talked about today, it does connect strongly overall to this 4C's mental toughness framework. You know, if we think about goal setting and confidence, well, small process goals are going to build belief. If you think about control, small process goals are going to focus the attention on what the athlete can influence on the training pitch, in a match, in the pool, on a course, sport, and so on. Then we've got the challenge aspect. It's gradual progression when it feels like you've got a degree of control, helps people grow. It helps people thrive under pressure. They don't feel threatened, so they're going to operate with a quieter mind. So for this goal-driven coach, there needs to be a shift from what result do we need today to what habits will help this athlete grow and get better. So I'm going to sum things up now. We're getting towards the end. I want to also reiterate, if you're a coach who loves goal setting, keep it. It's a strength, but certainly just try and educate yourself on the different types of goals out there and the pros and cons around goal setting. Realize that your ambition and your clarity are hugely valuable, but also recognize that not every athlete is going to experience goals in the same way. It is important to realize that some do need small steps. They need some help to take ownership. They really do need some emphasis on process. That's right, process, process, process. I'm going to repeat that. They need a strong sense of partnership and connection with you, the coach. And when you get the balance right, ultimately you don't just develop better performers. You develop better people, you build stronger relationships, motivation is going to increase, and alongside all of that, there's going to be lots more smiles on the faces of people. And ultimately, this is the foundation for long-term success and positive well-being. So, I'd like to thank you for listening today to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast. If this episode does resonate with you, feel free to share it with a coach, a parent, or an athlete who might find it helpful. And as always, focus on the process this coming week and get those process goals set. Take care. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.